16 years. The reason why we are here tonight is to propose for 3 structures to be built in the west side of McCougan Park. Let's create a learning environment and recreation space for our Walnut Grove children and community members. Our vision is to partner with the Township of Langley to create a learning facility for students, community members, and public groups. This includes a public covered picnic area, pit latrine, and a community garden on the west side of McCougan Park in the Walnut Grove, facing 204th Street. As educators, we have a desire to bring our students to this area and to be able to expose them to our local environment. Currently, we have interpretive panels that are mounted in the lower ravine in Yorkson Creek. And often, classes from Gordon Greenwood Elementary School that have nearly 400 students and Dorothy Peacock Elementary School that has 500 students go down to this area to learn about their environment. It is also a spawning stream. So every October or November, any of you can come and watch beautiful chum and coho salmon spawn. It is an amazing educational experience for any child or any community member that comes to visit. What we would like to do is we would like to have 3 specific structures built on the west side of McCougan Park. This includes an undercover picnic shelter. It also includes a community garden, and it also includes a latrine. All 3 of these areas would be able to service not only our students at both schools, but also our community. As a mother, I live across the street from Gordon Greenwood Elementary School, and my children have grown up in this area. Having my young children walk over to the other side of McCougan Park, and they need to go to the bathroom, there is no bathroom. But also, if it starts raining or there's snow, often we have classes that come down to the ravine and we have to turn around and we have to go back to our class because we just don't have an area that's covered for our students to do their work. The community garden is also an important aspect too. This area would be devoted to community members, but also to our students at both schools. We know that there are large wait lists for community gardens, and this would be an amazing opportunity for members and neighbors in our community to participate. We truly believe that this area can be used by community groups and service students in both schools, or maybe more than just 2 schools. We believe that this area would be able to bring enjoyment. It would allow not only for the students to use this area more effectively, but also for sports groups and for those teams that are participating in sporting activities on the other side of 204, but also on the other side of the ravine. Having a latrine there would be wonderful, as well as a sheltered area. If we move to the next slide, we did a survey out on the Walnut Grove Community Facebook page. We felt that this was important to do and to be able to gain support. The following questions were asked. I support adding 1 or more features to the current McCougan Park west of Yorkson Creek. As you can see, we had 93% of people respond yes. That's out of 146 responses. In addition, we also asked about the structures people were interested in. These were covered picnic area, community garden, and latrine and other. Now, we had an amazing response. We had 88% say the covered picnic sheltered area was very important. There is the latrine and the community garden as well. Thank you so much, Mr. Mayor and councillors, for entertaining our proposal, and we appreciate you listening to it. Thank you.
Thank you very much for bringing that to our attention. I do have one councillor with a question or comment. Councillor Ferguson.
Oh, yes, thank you very much indeed for coming. I think that's great. I always called, well, the kids have played soccer and sports all through that area. I have always called the Muluclugan Park the Forgotten Park, because I know over the years, everybody always asks me, what are you going to do about McClugan Park? Most people don't know where it is, but anyway, it's not too far from the two schools you mentioned. Are you, I mean, I want to ask you a loaded question. Of course, you want something from us. Are you thinking of getting donations from the community and abroad, if I may?
Yes. So there are a number of different areas that we could possibly draw money from. First of all, we do have the support from Gordon Greenwood and Dorothy Peacock and their administration to be able to address the PAC, the Parent Association. We also are hoping to touch base with Coast Capital, Home Depot, Fortis. We have the BC Agriculture in the Classroom, Fraser Health, and there's a number of different other organizations, including LEPS, that we can possibly approach.
I think that's great. Thank you very much for coming, both of you.
Thank you. And perhaps you could check with some of the local service clubs, like Rotary, Lions. They do support the community in these sorts of ventures, and have in the past. There are some community gardens that are sponsored by Rotary, so I'd certainly reach out to them too.
That'd be lovely.
Thank you very much.
Great, thank you.
Oh, Councillor Arneson, sorry.
Oh, sorry. Thank you, Worship. Just another thought, just because you mentioned the fish, and perhaps the Pacific Salmon Foundation might be interested in giving you some funding if you wrote them a nice letter.
Yes, thank you. Good.
Thank you. Okay, the next delegation is Mr. Peter Ash. Please come forward.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and councillors. My name is Peter Ash, and I've been a resident and property and business owner in Langley for 16 years now. I'm also a father, and so I've always had a real concern for the safety and security of the children and youth of Langley. In fact, one of the things that attracted our family to locate within the township is that there's always been known as a safe and very family-oriented community where family values are very pervasive. I share this backdrop to provide some context to the remarks I'm making this evening. I became aware several months ago of a Langley resident who's been variously known in media as Jonathan Yaniv and Jessica Yaniv.
Excuse me, Mr. Ash.
Yes.
I'm going to ask that you refrain from identifying any particular person in our community, and that if you have anything to say about policies or about our facilities, that you restrict your comments to that.
Okay.
To be respectful. Thank you. I believe staff made you aware of that prior to you coming.
This concern relates to the public safety of children and families in Langley. An individual it's a matter of public record in the township records, that an individual made application to use public facilities to host an event in Langley public pools. And I have a concern about that application that was presented.
I think I could just help you. We've never received an application. Is that correct, Mr. Backen? We have not received an application for the event.
Can I make my presentation?
Sure, but I'm just going to.
Or should I just end it now?
Well, I'm going to set you straight because you're giving false information. So there was no application received by the Township of Langley, and so I want to make sure that you're clear on that.
There was a request to make a presentation before the council on July 22nd, and the contents of that are publicly available, and the contents of that indicated that the individual in question was wishing to use public facilities to host a topless pool party for underage children, for children as young as age 12 in this community. And the proposal was that public facilities of the Township of Langley would be used and parents would be prohibited from attending such an event. That's a matter of public record. That request to appear as a delegation laid out those details, and it's on the Langley Township website.
Correct. That's correct.
And so that's what I'm here to speak to this evening.
Okay.
My concern with this application, or rather with this request for use of facilities, this request to make a presentation to use facilities, was that the proposal involved the use of facilities to promote an activity that was co-ed in nature, where children as young as age 12 would attend, could be topless, and the proposal was that parents be prohibited from attending. I was rather surprised this proposal and this suggestion received media coverage both locally, nationally, and internationally. And I was quite surprised that that was put over until the September meeting and that the request was entertained in any fashion at all. I'm simply here this evening to register my concern as a parent and as a resident of Langley that such activities would be in any way entertained and wouldn't be dismissed out of hand. This would not be an appropriate use of public facilities, in my opinion. For the safety of children in this community, individuals making such a presentation should be immediately instructed that such activities fall outside of guidelines of community decency and community acceptability. And I simply wanted to make it clear, as a resident of Langley, that when such proposals come, there are a large number of people that did write letters to the Mayor and Council on this matter, not just myself. Several people did, indicating their concerns, so I believe everyone's aware of exactly what I'm talking about, but I've been publicly prohibited from giving any details. So you've kind of tied my hands behind my back, even though it's in the media, locally and internationally. I'm not allowed to talk about it here in public somehow.
This is the media. This is a council meeting.
Yeah,
and
I'm
we're
quite aware.
respectful to everyone.
Yeah, but this is a matter of public record, this individual's name. This is a matter of public record in Langley. And it's not a matter of disrespect, it's a matter of concern for the safety of children in Langley that such events shouldn't be conducted in this township. And I simply wanted to share my concern that should such a request or such a proposal to make a presentation come forward in the future, it would be my hope the Township Council would clearly indicate such an activity would not be in the best interest of safety and public interest. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, the next delegation is Sonia Singh and neighbors.
Good evening. I thank you for this opportunity to address the rain garden issue in our neighborhood. This is Harp, one of our residents there, and I am Sonia Singh, live in the neighborhood of 205 and 68 roughly. We forwarded a petition with close to about 70 signatures from about 35 homes in our neighborhood. From this, it is abundantly clear that not even one of the households in our neighborhood are in favor of these gardens. My understanding is that the community development people who decided upon these rain gardens, their primary objective was drainage. I appreciate that totally. However, our objections are as follows. Number one, majority of us were not made aware by the builder, the realtor, or the township when we bought our homes that these would be our responsibility. Second, you call them rain gardens, I'm sorry, I call them ditches, are very difficult to maintain. Our demographics ranges from young families to elderly folks. It is a health hazard, a fall risk for elderly people in these uneven ditches, as well as a risk to little children who play around on the streets in our neighborhood. Number two, I have found garbage in these public rain gardens, as would be attested by most of my neighbors who have come to this presentation. The garbage ranges anywhere from used surgical gloves, beer cans, plastic cups. I have one neighbor sitting here who attests to the fact that she's gone in and picked up condoms as well. I respectfully object to the fact that we have to clean these public ditches. My neighbors have spotted rodents in these ditches as well, and cleaning out these ditches, I can attest to the fact that I have come out multiple times with an itchy rash. Number four, the bushes that the township has so kindly planted are quite tall in some areas, and they are a hazard, as they obstruct view while driving, while walking, etc. Some of the streets in our neighborhood are pretty narrow, and I have personally witnessed an accident between a truck that was backing out and a car going down the street. Imagine how it would be, that was a truck, if smaller cars are backing out. Number five, the rain garden occupies a fair bit of space, and the adjacent streets in some areas are quite narrow. It just does not make sense. Parking shortage is an issue in this neighborhood, while all this space is being occupied by these open, wide ditches. Number six, when I raised this issue with your engineering department, please let me humbly submit, my sense was that they also thought it was a nuisance. I I know that we have engineering, I believe, here, community development here. So we, the residents here, come before you to request your assistance in resolving our concern. One, these rain gardens have ruined the aesthetic value of our neighborhood. You guys have the experience, though know how to fix it. Now, would that entail just using grass as an option? Whether that would be using gravel on the sides and planting some, smaller plants, easier to maintain plants? Or would that entail filling up the middle part of the ditch with rocks and pebbles all the way to the top to kind of even it out? Would that be a sensible approach? That would eliminate falls, by the way, accidents, garbage disposal. Or would it be plausible to cover part of it to widen our streets so that it could be used towards parking? All I know, sir, ladies, sirs, that we live in a democracy, and democracy requires that when every tax-paying house in our neighborhood is not pleased by these rain gardens, that you, the chosen ones, you, the ones with the expertise and the know-how, consider putting some remedial plans in place that would be suitable to the majority of our neighborhood. I'm going to let Harp continue on with the safety concerns.
Perfect. Thank you. Good evening. Sorry, I don't have any writing. I just kind of go off the top of my head. I've been a Burnaby firefighter for 15 years, and my biggest concern is the safety part of it, like Sony mentioned. So my daughter, Bella's 8, my son, Benjamin's 4, and every time we back out of our driveway, once those bushes get high enough, it's hard for us to see out going out of our driveways. And then traffic going westbound to eastbound from 208 to 204. People are using 68th to kind of go into downtown Langley kind of area. Traffic's coming very quickly up that street, like very fast. So all it's going to take is one of us backing out and getting T-boned, and our children are going to be on those ends, right? And I've seen it. I've been there. I've witnessed it as a firefighter. So that's my biggest concern, is the safety part of it, having those trimmed down, or having the low maintenance by putting sod down. I know I was born and raised in Cloverdale, and out there they had sod and grass, and we just mow it and make it look nice. And so that's the reason why I'm up here. Is more of the biggest thing is our safety concern, not just for my family, but for everyone's family in that neighborhood or other neighborhoods that encounter those problems.
Thank you.
I appreciate it.
Thank you. And those recommendations, were you able to provide them to our clerk? You had a list of recommendations in your presentation?
Yes.
Okay, yeah, that'd be excellent before you go, or to email it to us.
Perfect.
Appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate your time.
Yeah, thanks. Okay. So now we move on to bylaws for first and second reading. Bylaw, or F1, is rezoning application number 100533. And development permit application number 101077. This is Castle Hill Homes, bylaw 5499 and 5506. Can I have a motion, please? Councillor Ferguson, second by Councillor Whitmarsh. Any discussion on F1? Seeing Councillor Richter.
Yes, I just wanted to note that the report indicates that there are 42 significant trees, but only one will be retained.
Okay, thank you. No further discussion. I'll call the question on F1. Carries with Councillor Richter and Councillor Woodward opposed. And move on to bylaws for first, second, and third reading. I believe. Yeah. McLeod Athletic Park Capital Works Loan Authorization, bylaw 2019, and alternative approval process, bylaw number 5507. Can I have a motion, please? Councillor Long, second by Councillor Kunst. Any discussion on G1? Councillor Richter.
Yes, just for the viewing public here today and maybe watching the streaming at home. This is the first of 3 bylaws. They're all coming in a row. And the total of these 3 bylaws amounts to $85.987 million in new debt that will be taken on this year by the Township of Langley. If we think development is paying for itself, I think this is a clear indication that it's not paying for itself. I myself think it's very unreasonable to take on $86 million in 1 year in new debt. And I have never been on a council in the 20 years that I've been here where we have undertaken new debt to this extent. So I will not be supporting this bylaw. I think we have to, or the next two, I think we have to learn to live within our means, and excessive borrowing like this is not living within our means.
Thank you. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, I'll call a question for G1. It carries with Councillor Richter and Councillor Arneson opposed. Move on to G2, this Land Acquisition Loan Authorization Bylaw 2019 and Alternative Approval Process Bylaw number 5508. Can I have a motion, please? A motion, Councillor Whitmarsh, second by Councillor Davis. Any discussion? See none, I'm going to. Oh, sorry. I'll go right back to you. Councillor Arneson.
Thank you, Worship. I just want to comment on this process, and as those of you who are residents in the township will recognize that when we have our budget process, we do have an engagement section of it, and we would like and hope that people will be looking at this and making an assessment. I just want to point out from my perspective the mechanism or the manner in which we're going after whether or not the voters are approving this is the alternate approval process, which I don't personally support as a way to put forward large expenditures, because I think that it doesn't give the community long enough time to rally and signify that they are not in support of this. So for that and other reasons, I won't be supporting this.
Any further discussion? Councillor Richter.
Yeah, I wonder, I might just add to what Councillor Arneson has said, which is if you, the residents and the voters, think $86 million of new debt in 1 year is not acceptable, you can sign this alternate approval petition. And if there are 8,500 signatures obtained within the specified time frame, then council won't be allowed to do this borrowing.
Thank you. Thank you for that clarification. Any further discussion on G2? Seeing none, I'm going to call the question. It carries with Councillor Richter and Councillor Arneson opposed. Move on to G3, and this is Strategic Land Acquisition Loan Authorization Bylaw 2019 and Alternative Approval Process Bylaw number 5509. Could I have a motion, please? Councillor Woodward, seconder. Councillor Whitmarsh. And discussion. Councillor Davis.
Okay. Councillor Richter pointed out a total number here, and it's an awful lot of money. It's 30 years, 30-year money. We're going to borrow it for 30 years, and I'm going to vote for it. And the reason I'm going to vote for it is that we are going to be using these lands for the Township of Langley people. And it's largely properties that will be used for, we may use them for a school, we may use them for roads, we may use them. And I feel that that in 5 years, we may not be able to get enough of these pieces together. They may be untangible in 4 or 5 years. And if we don't buy them now, we may not be able to get them. To say that the reason I'm going to support this is that 15, 20 years ago, we had lots of land. And we paid $350,000, $400,000, up in that Willoughby area, $500,000, $350,000 an acre. And we were able to buy it, so we bought it. And now we're going to buy land that's $2 million an acre, $2.5 million an acre. So the reason it balances, we paid so little for some of it, but we think it was little. It was a lot of money then, but we paid $350. Now we're paying. So the only reason that I'm going to support this is because it's going to balance it. Because there's someday Willoughby will be built out, and like I say, we have to use the land. It's a lot of money. But I just think this, I'm going to support this. It's 30 years, 30-year money, and it is going to put our taxes up. But if we don't have something there in 2, 4, 5, 7 years from now, where are we going to put a school? Where we're going to, some of this land will be untenable, and not just a school, a road, or anything else. So that's why I just wanted you to know why I'm going to support this, and I struggle with it because it's an awful lot of money. But Willoughby needs roads. It needs to be, and if we buy this land in 5 years, we'll be in the market. If we don't have it, we won't be in the market, and we're going to have to borrow more money to get it. So I'm going to vote for it. I just wanted you to know why I'm going to vote for it.
Thank you, Councillor Davis. Councillor Whitmarsh.
Yes, thank you. I think there's no doubt that this is a significant amount of money to borrow, and it is a lot, and for a community to think of that is quite significant. However, I reflect on my time here in Langley and friends of mine who live here, and how many of us, maybe you in the room, have thought, gee, if I just would have bought that land 10 years ago, 15 years ago, just think where I'd be today if I would have invested it at the time. And we have an opportunity here to be very strategic and to buy some land that is going to go up in value. It's going to go up over the next 10 or 15 or 20 years, whatever that is, in a very significant way. And we have an opportunity to purchase that for the purposes of community, to make our community a better community, to expand for parks or schools or whatever that might be, but to have access to that land to be able to develop and use it in a way that benefits our community. If we wait, as Councillor Davis suggested, 5 years or 10 years, it will be significantly more money than this. And that's only if the land is actually available. And so we have a significant opportunity here, and certainly it is a significant amount to borrow, but it is about the future. And I think that one of the things that Council needs to do is to think about the future. We need to be visionary. And we can't just think about what's good for Langley 1 year from now and 2 years from now, but what's good for Langley 10 years from now, 15 years from now? Where do we want to be? That's the responsibility of each member of Council, is to be visionary and think through that. And we're not buying a building that we're going to maybe is going to get old and derelict. We're not buying an old car that's going to fall apart. We're buying land, and land goes up in value. There's actually really nothing safer than land in terms of investment. And so that's why I'm supportive of it. I'm supportive of the future. I'm supportive of buying land when we can get it now, because it's going to be a whole lot more expensive later to do it, and we need to consider the future of our community. So I will be supporting this, and the other ones that came forward. I do support them for that reason. It's not just because we feel like racking up debt, it's because we're thinking about the future of Langley.
Thank you. Councillor Ferguson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I appreciate the comments of both Councillor Whitmarsh and certainly Councillor Davis. We spent an awful long time deliberating and going over parcels that were potentially available for sale throughout the community. And as people in the business would say, where they're not creating any more land, and large parcels are not always available anymore. We're not looking at expropriating land. We're looking at purchasing land. We're working with our staff. We have spent a lot of time deliberating on these particular parcels, and also looking at what they use for, whether they're parks or schools or roads, or planning and preparing for the future. And those are things that our citizens on a regular basis criticize us, and justifiably so, for not thinking forward enough, and planning and preparing for the future. And we should credit ourselves with having an awful lot of parkland, an awful lot of areas prepared for schools, and we've been lucky that way because our past colleagues have made sure that those resources and those lands are available. Again, if you look for a large parcel in this community now, I'm talking about 20, 30 acres, they're very, very, very difficult. I'm talking about developable land, not agricultural land. and that's for municipal parks and municipal schools and things like that. I think planning for the future and using, as I said before, land as our commodity, it's an important thing, and I believe our staff have really negotiated to get very good prices, and also the borrowing percentages are really good through the Municipal Finance Authority. So yes, indeed, I also will be supporting this. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Kunst.
Yeah, I too will be supporting this. And one of the reasons why, one of the first conferences I ever went to when I was a new councillor, one of the speakers said to help us make decisions about the future was think about the child that isn't born yet and the business that isn't here yet. And so with that in mind, and just with a vision for the future, land is not a depreciating asset. It's an investment into the future. And I know we talked about how this might impact our taxes, and I think, Mayor, maybe through your worship to staff, that maybe they could explain how that might affect our tax base initially. But I will be supporting this. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Woodward.
Yeah, I just also echo some sympathy and some support for a lot of the comments that are here. I don't take lightly borrowing or supporting the borrowing of this amount of money, $87 million. But before I get into that a bit more, I had a couple of questions for staff. Mr. Bracken, what is the current balance of the land reserve? What is the land reserve?
The land reserve is a fund that we actually set up such that we could actually acquire land and sell land and hopefully reach equilibrium. Right now, the balance is in a owing situation of $34 million, but it's owing to ourselves. We've actually used other reserves to fund the land reserves so we can make some acquisitions, and we have some properties that are coming on stream slowly through the rezoning process or rehabilitation process that we will be looking to dispose of in the upcoming years. So
previous councils have liquidated land assets to develop things. Is that accurate?
That's correct. They've actually used them to acquire land or to build infrastructure.
So that'd be why it's in deficit?
That would be part of it. The other part of it has been the process to dispose of land has taken a bit longer and been a bit more difficult than we first assumed.
So, for example, I had a couple of other questions too. How much money would we? I think I might have given you a heads up on this one. How much money would we have potentially saved for the taxpayer if we had acquired all of the additional land that we're buying now, if these bylaws are approved and survived the petition process? Say if we'd bought them 5 years ago.
It's an interesting question. As we look at, say, the Willoughby Park area, 10 years ago, we probably would have paid about, we'll say $400,000 to $500,000 per acre. 5 years ago, we likely would have paid about $1 million and a half per acre. And now, to finish it off, we're in about the $3 million per acre range. So you're seeing some significant escalation in pricing. And unfortunately, the pricing seems to be sustainable. With the recent market events, there's been a bit of a plateau, but we haven't seen a collapse, and far from it. We're seeing people holding their properties, waiting for the market to return.
So if we purchased them for $1 million an acre at 2.5% per year 5 years ago, you might have done okay with that purchase?
I think it would have been better than the returns that we're now receiving from the market, yes.
So, another couple of the questions. If we have a site like this and we acquire it for a relatively lower amount of money than the LEC acquisitions, for example, are we more likely to get high and middle schools built in our community sooner if land costs are lower?
I think you're referring to the fact that in Langley Township, we found success in having schools built by having the municipality place its playing fields or its parks next to the actual school sites themselves. There are no guarantees, but generally we found a lot of success in that, where we actually have the land and allow the parks to be adjacent. It's actually facilitated the Ministry of Education in building those facilities, so it's helped a great deal.
Yeah, so to follow up on that, so for example, if the Ministry of Education comes along 5 years from now and finally decided, or even 3 years from now, and finally decided they want to locate a high school and a middle school in Willoughby, then we are going to then be looking to purchase land or contribute to that for the park portion?
That's correct. The concept you're talking about is a 15 to 16 acre school site, which would have an equivalent size park site. So in that circumstance, we'd be looking at acquiring at least 14, 15, 16 acres.
And that might be $3 million an acre versus $2 million an acre, or $4 million an acre versus $2 million an acre? unknown, right?
Unknown because we're trying to plot what the market will look like in, 3 to 5 years.
All right, thanks. So I just wanted to follow up with a couple of comments. I mean, I think illustrating very clearly there that I think it's important for everyone, including members of the public and the media, to understand what we're buying with this $87 million and why we're doing it, prior to rendering judgment on it, which was occurring on the weekend on social media. We had people attacking it prior to even knowing what it was for. So I think over time, hopefully the facts can come out and explain this, that it is a big number. It is $87 million, and I don't take that lightly. And I think that in the end, when you start looking at the LEC acquisitions that are part of this, we're up to $3 million to $5 million per acre to finish off the LEC area. And now we have an opportunity to acquire a large site at around $2 million an acre, which also includes a 36-acre passive park. So I think in the long run, at 2.5% for a period of time, we're going to see some of that money flow back from the development community over time, potentially come back from the Ministry of Education, and really have a great deal on the table for the taxpayer to really provide our contribution to that potential development in our community at a great, great deal versus the potential alternative. So I obviously support it, and I think over time more of the facts will come out, and I just push and hope that the taxpayers and everything will wait for all of those facts before rendering judgment. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Arneson.
Yes, thank you, Worship. I do appreciate all the comments around the table. I take the contrarian view. I don't think anybody is wrong in this debate about whether or not it's good value to invest that type of money at this point. But I do take exception to the fact that I feel there's this intimation that somehow people who are against this don't have any vision. Actually, I think we do have a vision, it's just a different vision. And so I'm not saying that there couldn't be very good value in this over time, but I have some serious reservations about these things that are historically true, but hypothetically it could be not true, that there is such a huge value, that the land will keep increasing. And my biggest worry overall is that we are going to limit ourselves in a time of uncertainty to have the funds that will be necessary to respond to things we can't even tell that we will need at the moment. I talk largely about global warming and issues of crisis that are coming up. We have not budgeted anything for that. And if I ask myself, what would my priority be? My personal safety would be a big priority when it comes to where to spend that money. And I don't doubt that these will be wonderful assets for the community going forward, but I do become concerned that it's going to limit our ability to be responsive to other things that come our way. There might be a better land value in a different place next week. SkyTrain may be of interest for us to amass land there. I really have no clue. So I don't have a crystal ball, and I'm not suggesting anybody else is making this up, but I do feel that it is challenging to look at a 30-year timeline for a embedded tax increase when we don't have that kind of certainty.
Thank you. Councillor Richter.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Mr. Backen, if possible. Mr. Backen, is it Township's job to buy land for schools?
Ultimately, no. The school district, through the province, acquires the school sites. In this case, we're in a fortunate position where if we have land, we can certainly dispose of it to the school district through the Ministry of Education at fair market value.
Okay. And let's face it, everybody at this table got reelected a year ago. There were promises made by those of us who ran for office. And shifting this new council spending priorities to debt, does this mean that there will be no more tax increases for the rest of this term? Because we're funding through debt now.
That's correct. With debt comes along an interest component and as well a capital or a principal repayment. How council wishes to deal with that is a matter of some debate, in that it certainly could be through tax increases or it could be through the reallocation of other funds, such as contributions to capital improvements. We've not wrestled with that one yet, as council hasn't deliberated on the 2020 budget.
So there's no plans for a zero tax increase as far as you're aware?
Well, we have no plans for a zero tax increase or for a tax increase at this point, because that would be presumptuous on staff's part to suggest that council's deliberated on that.
Okay. And just to pick up on a point that Councillor Arneson made, a 30-year amortization period means that the children of today will be paying for this $86 million debt by the time they reach adulthood.
Thank you. A couple of points I'd like to make. Is interesting comment on the debt. I just want to make it crystal clear that municipalities by law are not allowed to borrow to cover operational expenses. We do have to make sure that that is balanced. However, municipalities can borrow for infrastructure, for land, and assets, hard assets like that. So I just want to make that clear. The other thing is, if this was land that we were going to buy around, say, a future SkyTrain station for development into housing, I think that's not our job as government. Our job is to secure land, as has been spoken very eloquently by my colleagues here, secure land for the future, for our children, for public and for community purposes, and that's exactly what we're doing here. And it's prudent that we do it. There's many pieces of land that, over my short time here on council, that have been strategically purchased in the past and used with either land swaps with the school board so they could get some schools where our community needs it. Our community is growing. There's no denying it. People are moving in here. This is a reality throughout the entire Lower Mainland, Metro Vancouver and Fraser Valley Regional District. It's a reality. We are going to need these spaces. We can't continue to build condos and townhouses without green spaces and without ensuring that we work with our partners to ensure that there's adequate school space. So I have no problem with this borrowing. I think it's prudent and it's for our community. One last thing, I know there's some other speakers that want to speak yet. I just want to clarify on when I borrow money for my farm or for my home, there's two sides to it. How much do we need and how are we going to pay for it? And I know that staff have been working hard on how we're going to pay for it, and there are some reserves put aside or some money that we've discussed. I wonder if Mr. Backen, you could maybe elaborate on the prepayment and that it may not necessarily result in a tax increase to make the principal and interest payments.
Part of the challenge, Your Worship, is the allocation between parkland and, I guess, land that could be used for other purposes, such as schools. We're relatively confident that the parkland position can be funded through Parks DCCs or any debt funded through Parks DCCs, which is what we collect from development applications when they get to various stages, either through rezoning or whether through to building permit. Our challenge is for lands that we may be acquiring for the longer term or maybe used for some other purposes, such as schools, where we may recover funding from the other levels of government at the then market price. In those situations, we really can't use Parks DCCs or development paid for things. We have to use our general revenues. Hence, we have to borrow those funds. And when we borrow those funds, we have to look for a repayment plan. Now, the repayment could be as short as 5 years, but it could take 10 or 15 years before we actually are able to be in a position to devolve those properties for school purposes. As such, then, that means we have to find a way to carry that. And usually that's going to be through such options as raising additional revenue or reallocating existing resources. And as we've mentioned, reallocations could be by decreasing some capital programs or projects for a few years until we can actually get to a position where we think we can fund that without or return the funding levels back to those capital amounts that we think are appropriate.
Thank you. Thank you. Councillor Long.
Well, I guess I should say something, seeing how everybody else has said something, and I don't know as I would have agreed in all of the three bylaws that we've got here, but I did vote for them. The first one, of course, being McLeod Park, which is a facility that everybody wants to see improved, and I think that's a good use of money. The second one had some issue. There were three properties in the second one, and I didn't agree with one of them in the middle, the Aldergrove Inn, but I voted for it anyway because the other two properties make a good amount of sense. And I think that some of the comments that have been made about the future and our kids and my grandchildren and who's paying for what, there's a 36-acre park involved with this bylaw, and I think that's a terrific addition to the Arboretum ribbon, right? The ribbon that we've been trying to build all around the developed area of Langley, so it's a terrific addition to that 36 acres. And then the other part is the school and park site. I mean, that if you're not planning for the kids in the future, you know, what else are you doing with that? I mean, you have to have a place for kids to go to school and to play. So it's risky. I don't know if we should be in the land development business. If we should have been, they should have listened to me 18 years ago, because I made a couple of motions on some properties that didn't go through back in those days. But shoulda, coulda, woulda, I guess, is the is the term that comes to mind at that. But I think that this is a good investment for the future, so I will support it.
Thank you. Councilor Woodward.
Yeah, I just want to respond to some of the core points, and I won't try to debate everything. As I said earlier, I think a lot of the facts will come out over time. But the two councillors have mentioned the 30-year money, and I just want to correct. There's some education that I've gone through in preparing to support or not support these bylaws and around some of the restrictions of municipal borrowing. And we have a 5-year term in which we can reduce that principal and reduce some of those interest costs if some of the resolution occurs with the ministry, or we determine some DCCs for parks, or we build the connector road, which is bordering these properties, and getting some of that money also back from DCCs. So that may not end up turning out to be 30-year money, as we've heard. So that may not, in fact, be the case. And at 2.5% for that first 5 to 10-year period, we're at the rate of inflation for municipal borrowing, which isn't available to the private sector for the most part. So we have an amazing opportunity to really make significant investments and really plan for the future and work with other levels of government to deliver for the community, when in the short term they haven't done so. And so for me, I just had a couple of examples that we drew up that, debt, you can borrow too much money. But right now we're allowed to borrow up to about 500 to 600 million. And we're nowhere near that. No one's over leveraging. No one's bearing a lot of risk. We are planning prudently for the future at manageable interest rates for great assets. Like Councillor Whitmarsh said, we are not buying a recreation facility that's going to depreciate, have to be replaced and maintained. This is raw land that's increasing much faster than 2.5% per year. So, for example, did we all buy our first homes with cash? Did we save for 20 years before we could buy that home? None of us would own a home probably today if we did that. For example, do students save money for 10 years before they go to college? Or do some of them who don't have any means take out a student loan? Because it makes sense to do that. In a factory or a business, do you save up and not seize opportunities to not build that factory and expand? Or do you borrow money because it makes sense to do so at rates that make sense? And I think over time, this will be one of the good examples of forethinking and a great opportunity that was seized upon, that would not be available to us even potentially a few years from now. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Ferguson.
Yeah, I think those of us that have been here a while have heard the term, why would you do that? And I remember one of the comments, why would you put the operation center up at 224th and keep the land here in the core here, which could be better usable? And again, that's worked out. Why would you want to work with a regional district to put parks in place? And since then, we put a number of regional parks in place. Why would you want to put a building here at 65th and 203rd when we have a municipal core up at 224th and the Fraser Highway? And the answer is it's always been a benefit. Those people thinking for the future made a difference, and a lot of us wondered how that's made too. Another thing, and some of the builders are in this audience tonight, where an opportunity came to us to put a event center with a rink and some sort of working with the wood industry, and worked with the provincial government to put together the LEC. Well, we could have just built a small building with a rink. They decided to build a bigger building and add to it buildings B and C and other things. And now, again, that's another thing that has really kind of mushroomed because a few people a few years back took a risk. And I think, yes, we're taking a risk here as well, but I believe it's going to be for the benefit of the community. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question on G3. And carries. Councillor Richter and Councillor Arneson opposed. Now we'll move on to bylaws for consideration at third reading. H1 is rezoning application 100489, development permit application 100935, bylaw number 5483. This is Sikam Saran. Could I have a motion, please? Councillor Whitmarsh and a seconder. Councillor Kunst. Discussion, Councillor Richter.
Yeah, I just want to point out that there's 104 significant trees on this property and only 2 will be retained.
Thank you. Any other discussion? Seeing none, I'll call a question on H1. It carries. Councillor Richter and Councillor Arneson opposed. Move on to H2, rezoning application number 100584 and development permit application number 101006. Mitchell Group, this is bylaw 5494. Could I have a motion, please? Councillor Arneson, second by Councillor Davis. Discussion. Seeing none, I'm calling. Oops, sorry. There we go. I just saw it. Councillor Richter.
Yeah, of 401 significant trees on this property, only one will be retained.
Thank you. See no further discussion. Call the question on H2. Carries with Councillor Richter opposed. Move on to bylaws for consideration at third and for final adoption. This is rezoning application number 100580, Urbanics, Walnut Grove Development Corp. Bylaw 5489, and there's a clerk's note that everything's been done for this, and the public hearing on July 22nd. Councillor Ferguson moves it. Councillor Whitmarsh seconds it. Any discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question on I1. This would be just for, there's the bylaw. Carries unanimously. And bylaws for final adoption. J1 is a cannabis production farm bylaw, bylaw number 5496, 5497, 5498. I just want to ask Mr. Backen a question. I received some correspondence late today, and it just was a little bit unclear, and I understand Mr. Seffi is away, and he's probably one that's best to answer those questions, and I'll be asking council if we could defer this 2 weeks, just so I can get some clarification from our staff. Mr. Backen, would you agree that he's a person to clarify those points?
That's correct, Your Worship. Some of the questions, I think, revolve around odor and noise and the implications as to how that's measured in our jurisdiction to regulate those things when they are post-development applications. Yeah. So if it's a couple of weeks you seek, then in terms of trying to understand those issues better, I see no peril to the township by waiting to his return.
Okay, thank you. I see the speakers list. Councillor Kunst was kind of instrumental in this. I'm going to put it on to Councillor Kunst if she wishes to make that.
Thank you. I would just like to thank and congratulate Council for supporting this bylaw, as well as staff for all the research and the work they did to get this approval from the Minister of Agriculture. There was a lot of skepticism at the time if it would even be approved, so it kind of speaks volumes, in my opinion, to the kind of professionals we have here in the Township of Langley. It's a new industry with not a lot of regulation, so this gives our municipality some tools to manage concerns residents have when faced with a grow up in their neighborhood. It also gives cannabis producers some guidelines should they wish to operate in the Township of Langley. Thank you.
Thank you. So before I ask for that motion, there's no motion on the floor yet, so did you wish to make a motion to defer 2 weeks? Or,
sure, yeah.
It's been moved to defer this 2 weeks. Second by Councillor Davis. Councillor Richter?
No, I'm not supporting the deferral. Okay. I think the community needs this bylaw now. I think they've been quite vocal about the issues, primarily around smell and lights that they've been having to deal with. I think we should be giving them the protections now as opposed to in 2 weeks, and basically because the one letter that we got on it came from a cannabis producer, and of course they're going to want to change the requirements because the requirements aren't necessarily going to be cheap.
Thank you. And Councillor Arneson?
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. I guess if it's just a matter of a few weeks, I would prefer to have something come back. But in the meantime, I did have some language additions that might want to be considered. I guess we could do that after the fact. And just generally speaking, I have some issues with the noise mitigation plan because it doesn't specifically mention generators, which I know is something we hear a lot about. People complain about the drone of generators in their rural neighborhoods. And I would really like the specific question that is being raised, because I think it's very important for everybody to understand, because we do have existing greenhouses that may find it challenging to comply with this, and I don't know whether or not we can say for sure that this would retroactively apply to businesses that are already in operation, so cannabis facilities that are currently licensed, and whether or not it would be triggered for them to have to meet these new requirements when they renew their business license, is my question.
Thank you. And I think that's why the referral. Yeah. So, yeah, I appreciate that. I think just to be clear, we have, as I believe as council, we have to balance the interests of our residents and of the businesses that are affected. And waiting 2 weeks, getting that clarification, ensuring that we do have a bylaw that's going to work in Langley, and it's going to work for everyone, but it's certainly going to, I want to address the concerns of the residents, no question about that. But also, there's an industry here that, as council, we have to balance. They don't have as many voices, and I think we have to be cognizant of that. Councillor Long?
Okay, so thanks, Your Worship. We've received approval from the ministry, so I mean, we make any changes, does that mean we have to go back to the ministry? That's number one. Number two, would we not have a sort of a public hearing or some public input for this very purpose? You know, we could have residents and farmers and so forth give some input to it, but the first question would be more important. If we make changes, do we have to go back to the ministry?
Correct. I think in that case, we're better to rescind third reading, go back, make the amendments, perhaps go back to any public consultation you seek, then go back to the ministry. Another option would simply be to take this bylaw, which has been approved by the ministry, and then seek to do some amendments to it if you so chose. And then that separate amending bylaw could go to the ministry for further review and analysis, and then we at least have something in force and effect, because it will take a while.
Okay, but what's being proposed now is that we just put everything on hold and discuss it some more and then pass it, and then, but any changes that may come up in the process may cause some issues, right?
And I think Mr. Backen is correct. If we were to adopt this, and if there were some glaring changes, we could do an amending bylaw, which would then go to the minister and would still save some time. So,
correct.
But it's that clarification I'm seeking. Okay, thank you. Okay, I see no further discussion on J1, and this is on the deferral. Yeah. Okay, and it carries with Councillor Richter, Councillor Woodward, Councillor Arneson, Councillor Long opposed. Right, and we move on to items from prior meetings, and
Request to speak on that, if I can?
I'm just going to, yep, Councillor Woodward.
So I'm obviously going to declare a conflict of interest on this one, and I learned my lesson last time. I will not be texting anything to anyone, so no need to FOI or text records. Other than that, I'll declare a conflict of interest.
All right, thank you.
Leave your phone.
All right, you got film in that camera? So now we move on to items from prior meetings. This is K1, Heritage Alteration Permit, application number 101082, Statewood Properties Limited. And I would ask for... So I just want to get some clarification from staff, from Ms. Bauer. The motion, has it been, was it moved and seconded last?
That's correct, Your Worship. It's a development permit, so to have it on the floor previously, you'd have to move and second it.
So it's already been moved and seconded. So now we can enter into our discussion and that kind of thing. So, Councillor Long?
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, when we left off at midnight, I think it was on July the 22nd, we had already started to discuss it, but it got too late. I had made a suggestion that we perhaps would divide the application into what I would consider 3 different areas, and now the map here shows us what those 3 may be. And I'd like to make that motion that we divide it and then discuss it that way. But the 3 divisions would be 9217, 13, and 05, being the west side of Glover, as one part of the motion. 9150, 9148 as a second area, and then the other 3 properties on the Marian Church would be the third area. So if we divide it into 3, we could debate and consider each one rather than all of them together.
Okay. So a motion to divide, and does that...
Oh, in fact, there's the map showing it now.
Oh, there we go. So
West, East, and Mary Church.
Okay, so I'm just going to get some help from Ms. Bauer here. So that works with this particular motion to divide those properties, correct?
Yes, that's correct. We would just need a motion to do that.
Yeah, thanks. That's been moved by Councillor Long, second by Councillor Ferguson, and just by show of hands, all those in favor of division and opposed, Councillor Davis, Councillor Arneson, Councillor Richter are opposed to division, so the division carries. And so we'll start with 9217, 9213. Do you want to do the west? Councillor Long, what is your intention here?
I don't mind,
okay.
wherever you want to go.
Okay, so I'm going to clear the...
They'll all be interesting.
So I want to... yeah, it would be interesting. I have a question for staff, just to help set the stage here. There was, at one point in time, applications received by the Township of Langley for several of these properties for redevelopment. Do we currently have any applications for redevelopment of any of these properties? And if we do, which properties are they?
Correct, Your Worship. Just in the third week of August, I think approximately, we did receive applications for Glover East and for Mary Church on your map. So that entire block, the 6 properties, there's an application that's been received and is now being reviewed by staff.
Okay, so there's application. And how long, I guess there's so many variables, it's hard to say about how long it would take before that application. And would it be a heritage alteration permit or development permit, or what sort of permit are they applying for? Do you have that detail?
I think it's going to involve both a rezoning and a heritage alteration permit. Mr. Richardson?
Through Your Worship, it's, the current application is for heritage alteration permit with some variances included in that.
Okay. Okay, thank you. So that's those 2 blocks there that we've divided. And timeline, I know that's difficult to predict because there's so many variables dealing with proponents and consultants and that sort of thing, but any estimation of when that would possibly come to council, is that something you can speculate on?
Your Worship, subject to the timelines previously mentioned by Mr. Backen, the approximate time frame would be 6 months to a year.
Okay, thank you. That assists me a lot. One thing I know in the staff report, it talks about demolition permits. Now, this is a heritage conservation area, and because it's a heritage conservation area, this comes before council for demolition permit. Normally, we wouldn't see as council a demolition permit. Is that correct, Mr. Backen?
That's correct.
Yeah. So, and it seems to me that in other areas of the Township of Langley, when demolition permits have come forward, staff have requested that a development permit accompany it, so that it gives the community and staff and council a vision of what is going to be put in place once those buildings are demolished. And I think there's examples in the Township of Langley we know of right now. So my concern is that, because it's heritage alteration permits coming to council, we're now making a decision that normally we wouldn't have to make. Staff would say, bring us a development permit along with your demolition permit, and then it can go to council for consideration, all as one package. I think that's a reasonable thing to do. In my view, it's unreasonable to expect council and the community to see what will be in place of those buildings without first seeing the revitalization, or sorry, the development permit that will go with it. The redevelopment permit is what I want to say. And so if we're thinking 6 months a year on that one area, I'm wondering if council would consider sending this back to be packaged up with that development permit. So when it comes to council, we have that vision and we can see what the vision is and we can make our comments. And I think that's a more fair way to look at it. It's more reasonable for council to be able to have those deliberations. I'll leave those comments. I know there's certainly a speakers list, but I think that would be dealing with this bottom corner here. And sure. Well, it's some comments I put out that in the staff report, it does state that a demolition permit in a commercial area or typically comes with a development permit. Is that correct, Mr. Backen? Is that a typical? I'm sure there's exceptions to everything that's happened, but typically that's what occurs.
It has been a process we've utilized before, but you're correct. We have to be cautious. There's a number of exceptions to that, so council has the latitude to proceed either way.
That's right. Council still has the latitude. I'm not taking that away from council. I'm just saying that I think for me, I'm not going to speak for myself. It's reasonable for me to see what's going to be in its place so that when we do authorize the demolition that we have a vision for what's going to happen. So I'm going to open it up for some discussion, and maybe we'll have some motions here. Council Long, do you still have the floor? He's
wearing that button up.
Yeah, I was trying to get some buttons pushed here. Okay, so this is new news then, that there is an application being pending. I mean, first of all, let's be clear, nothing has ever come to council on any of these properties that I can remember. There's been discussion in the public and everywhere that there were some proposals made that were rejected apparently, but I don't remember, and I know for sure they never came to council.
That's correct.
Now, if in fact, as you're saying, Your Worship, that and the staff is saying that there are some pending applications, then the demolition permit would come along with those, just like is being said here. Normally, you make an application for development. Of course, you're going to have to demolish something along the way. So, exactly, I think I'm wondering, along with some others on council and others perhaps, why have a development? Why not have this accompany the development application? Why have a demolition permit come ahead of time? So I guess I'm a little confused now as to where we can go. But if it's imminent, then let's defer the whole thing until that comes.
Thank you. Councillor Davis? I'll go through the speakers list and we'll put a motion together.
Okay.
Or a referral motion.
I haven't seen any. On July 22nd, we broke for summer, and I've been concerned about this all summer, and now I'm told that there's an application downstairs. I prepared tonight because this is Fort Langley, and there's a lot of tension. And I've written down to gather my thoughts here. I want a concrete plan. There needs to be a plan in place first. So to grant a permit to tear down the Glover East and Mary Church, I want to see the plan. It says, and you pointed out, it says here, prior policy states on July 22nd, staff notes that although addressing the demolition of existing buildings as a component of a redevelopment application provides the most certainty for a community, and that's on page 10 of the report on July 22nd. That in itself is the problem here, because we stood here in the public hearing, everyone stood up and talked about the yays and nays and caused an awful lot of problem. No, there weren't any problems, but everyone's very passionate about Fort Langley. So it's going to be replaced. We're going to replace these buildings. This is why there is so much tension, and it's the unknown. This green amenity that I've been working on, I've been thinking about all summer long about tearing them down and putting in a green amenity creates another problem. Everyone likes it. It feels good in the community. It's like when 9166 on 2011, we granted a tear down of that building, and there was no development permit with it. And I said, well, what's he going to do? Put a picnic table there. And that's what's there today. And now when that picnic table leaves, the other people are going to say, oh, we like the community, we like the picnic table. That's going to create another problem and another divide in Fort Langley. The other point two, again, I wrote this down not knowing there's a permit application downstairs, but this is a heritage conservation area. Does conservation area mean to conserve that area? In my opinion, yes, it does. We have two conservation areas in Langley, Murrayville and Fort Langley, and I'm concerned that removing this many properties seriously jeopardizes Fort Langley's heritage conservation area. When these properties were purchased, they were knowingly purchased in a heritage conservation area, and that area comes with rules. It's like when you buy a piece of land in the ALR, if you let it run down, you let the sucker trees grow up, you dump some land crap on it, and then you argue, well, you can't farm it, and want to remove it from the ALR. That's called demolition by neglect. So right now, because I know there's an application downstairs, I want to look at it. I want to see what it looks like before I make a decision. So unless we can move something like that, I'm still at this point going to not vote to tear it down. I don't know if I'm getting ahead of myself here, but it's like, why today, right now, did I just learn that there's an application downstairs? I wish I'd known that, because I worried about this all summer long. I'm not making a joke of that, okay, but it's like, because as far as I'm concerned, you got to have a plan. It's it's not like a house over here or a house over there or here, tear it down. This is in a designed heritage area, and so I want to see the plans for that before I issue a tear down permit. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Backen, did you have a comment?
Worship, just speaking as to the timing, given the long weekend and whatnot, we're talking, I think, about approximately a week and a half ago that it actually arrived. So at the time of the actual public input session, there was no plan. There is a plan now, and as Mr. Richardson said, I guess consideration of that plan and before it gets to council will likely take in excess of, 9 months to a year, and who knows what it'll actually take. The challenge before council then is, and right now it's sitting with a matter of division, is what do they like? What would they like to see on these properties during that intervening period? Now, we know for Glover West there's no application. We know for Mary Church and Glover East there is now an application, but there's still the intervening time period, which the applicant is then entitled to have a consideration of the request for demolition. Council certainly can approve it or they can reject it. That's council's prerogative, but they must state the reasons relative to the heritage conservation area, not so much the timing and not so much the process, but why those properties should be maintained as they are for the year in this example, as opposed to them being demolished and something else in its place. And there's many good reasons for that, but council should articulate those.
Thank you. Councillor Arneson.
Yes, thank you, Worship. Well, I guess like Councillor Davis, we should have gone and wrung our hands together over the summer, because I was really thinking about this a lot, as I know other councillors were. It was something that I think weighed heavily on many. I wanted to refer to the Mayor's comments and Councillor Davis's, which I really support. I had actually gone the extra measure and was optimistic that there could be a motion put forward with respect to the demolition. So if we don't mind, for the public record, I just want to read out what I wrote, having to do with that. So the motion will be that each application for demolition within the Heritage Conservation Area must include design concept renderings for the redevelopment of every demolition site prior to the issuance of any demolition permit, and further, that each such plan must include details on the proposed density, form and character, vehicular and pedestrian circulation, parking, as well as relevant details regarding the relationship between the former property site and adjacent properties with respect to the heritage conservation guidelines, in order to strengthen the harmonization of any new infill with the scale of the existing streetscape, as well as the spirit and intention of the guidelines.
Thank you. Good comments. Thank you. Councillor Richter.
Well, we got an email this afternoon with items distributed from Barry Dashner, where it says quite clearly here, that it will be 5 years or so until redevelopment can proceed, even if approved, perhaps more. And that means that the whole downtown area is going to be in dereliction for up to another 5 years. So I'm worried about the safety of those buildings. They're all boarded up. They could be fire hazards. They could also attract vagrants and so on. But it's not clear to me, like the application that we've got downstairs, is that intended to proceed this year, or is it just being put in so they can see what's being planned there and we're going to allow them to take the buildings down?
Mr. Backen.
Your Worship, we don't have that background, but if we interpret the comments in the email that you're referencing, I think what they're saying is that the redevelopment process, rezoning process, is likely to take, we'll say, a year. After that, then there's the issue of actually constructing, building, and financing something. We don't know how long that will actually take, or if that's something that's imminent, or if it's on a 5-year horizon. That's why it'll be important for Council to articulate, in terms of the now divided motion, what the heritage considerations are that will warrant the situation remaining as it is, as opposed to the buildings being demolished.
Yeah, because I'm worried we're just going to go through this whole long argument process all over again. The people who spoke at the public hearing wanted the building saved, not to be torn down, but to be rehabilitated. And if the application coming through is not about rehabilitating buildings, are we going to listen to the same set of arguments all over again? This is becoming very circular. And I don't think it's been an effective process in the lease so far.
Your Worship, the application as it stands would not be in contemplating retaining any of the existing buildings in the Glover East and Mary Church area. It's a fairly comprehensive development that Council will be ultimately considering, but again, it's just in its very early stages of review. There's so much work to be done in that context that it's really hard to predict what the outcome, what it will actually look like when it gets before Council.
Councillor Whitmarsh.
Yeah, thank you. A couple of questions I have before I make a couple of comments. Maybe just a question through your worship to staff about the heritage conservation area. Can maybe just give just what kind of requirements are on a property owner to maintain the heritage value of property in a heritage conservation area? Like, I just don't really maybe help to explain what we would require of them or what is required of them.
Essentially, it's really thinking of the form and character of the buildings and their heritage significance because of what they've weathered and experienced throughout their lifetime. There's a couple things that are usually done in the heritage conservation area. That's to look at the buildings individually, and while somewhat arguable, I think it's somewhat settled. You can look at it as in total in terms of what the impact would be. And as one goes through the process, then the question is there certain structures or buildings that can be maintained that are consistent with the development process, or is it simply going to be certain elements that are maintained? There is no requirement that any particular building be saved or that any particular structure remain. It's really trying to come up with that artistic blend that shows that there is a heritage component, but as well a development proposal that's economically viable. So as we go through it, there is no thing that compels someone to be forced to maintain their property, to build it. There is instead the requirement that they try to take into account the form, character, and heritage elements in their building going forward and retain those things that they could. And some examples are usually going to be such things as some of the materials or bricks or perhaps a feature that would be repeated throughout the process. But it's something that is left really to the applicant to combine them into a format that council feels does meet the necessary elements to maintain the heritage, I guess, feel of the area.
Okay, so if a property owner doesn't want to, I'm just clarifying it, if a property owner does not want to keep a building or maintain a building and they would rather replace that building with something else, in essence, there's nothing that council would do or could do to force them to keep that old building.
Effectively correct. Let's take it back to first principles. If there's an old building that's there, are they required to maintain it or rehabilitate it? They're not. They could certainly simply allow it to lapse and fall down eventually if they did nothing. As part of the process, if they seek redevelopment, then we gather some jurisdiction where we can request and mandate some things be maintained. It would not be the structure itself; it would be some of the heritage, I guess, character and feel of the building and the area that it's within. And that's something that's somewhat discretionary and subjective on council's part. But as long as they can articulate the reasons as to why it does comply or why it does not comply, the courts will generally accept those reasons as being bona fide and not interfere. So in this case, then, once the development process starts, council has the opportunity to say, yes, you can demolish those buildings because they have no inherent value, because they're 1970s buildings, and some are much older, obviously, but there's some elements to it that we don't object to. There's some elements we do object to. As part of that, council can say, well, we'd like to actually see the application going forward, or they can say, well, we don't need to see it to recognize that there's no benefit to retaining those for the protracted period between now and when the development is actually built. So council has those jurisdictions, again, provided they can relate their comments back to some heritage concerns or elements either as to the buildings or the area itself.
That's helpful. So I guess just a couple of comments. I know that there's been lots of debate in the community about the heritage value of these properties. We've had certainly lots of emails and indications about that there is lots of heritage value. There's a history of these homes and who's built them and so forth. And some of that is quite compelling. But there's also other information that would indicate that it's not of heritage value. And that, for me, is also equally compelling. And so I sit there not being a heritage expert, trying to figure out all the information. But quite frankly, what we've just heard is that regardless of whether there's heritage value or not, the owner of those properties does not have to keep them. can let them go if they want to. That's a choice. There's nothing council can do about that. However, I think what we can do, and I think which has been spoken already, is that we can require that there is a development application associated with this demolition permit, that we don't just demolish properties and leave them vacant and empty, but that we actually have a plan, and then we put a plan in place. And that when we develop the plan and when we approve the plan, that the plan would have heritage quality to it and heritage value to it that would connect to the community. So whether the owner of the property wants to maintain the buildings that are there to fit into heritage, or whether they want to develop new buildings that fit into heritage, they do have to maintain a heritage component because it's in a heritage conservation area. So it feels to me that regardless of whether we think they're of heritage value or not, really isn't actually the question. Really the question is, what are we going to see in its place? Fort Langley is a very special community, and it creates lots of emotion in people. And I think that as council, I would agree as well with Mayor Froese that it's hard to imagine approving a demolition without having a plan. What is the plan? What is it going to look like? And council should be involved in the approval of that because it is in a heritage conservation area. So I would like to see all of these. I know we're talking maybe about one area, but I'd like to see all of these tied to an actual application. I don't think that the new structure, whatever that might look like, has to be built, of course, because it has to be demolished before you can build. But it might be 6 months, it might be 8 months, it might be some kind of time period in which council can deliberate, make sure that what's been planned in place fits in the heritage conservation area. And when that decision is made by council, then the demolition can occur. And until that time happens, I don't think we should be demolishing them. I think we should wait until we see what the plan is. If there's no plan, there's no demolish, in my opinion.
Thank you. Councillor Ferguson?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I wanted to clarify a few things that I imagine that Mr. Richardson suggested, 6 months, and other staff member have mentioned more. And also Mr. Dashner, or it's indicated in his submission, both the submission and the subsequent email as well, as to the 5 years, but the 5 years being, it takes time to construct, and it takes, it'll take time to demolish when the application does come through, because obviously you demolish prior to building. Obviously that's, and as Sameen suggested already, yes, according to our rezoning and heritage alteration permit and heritage conservation area, there will be requirements for density, for environmental, for form character, parking, and a whole list of other myriad of things for development has been mentioned already. So those would be ongoing processes. As you yourself, Mr. Mayor, have mentioned that, to move something in the past, to demolish it or otherwise, whether or not it's indeed the owner's understanding, owner's ability to do it, it's still a requirement, as been mentioned before, to maybe to suggest that we indeed, the council, ask for something to be replacing it and following all the rules and regulations of Township Council rezoning process. So I'm beginning to wonder whether our division now matters as much, knowing that it's earlier on mentioned that those five properties or have an application downstairs. So it certainly changes things. So that certainly changes my opinion on whether we should move ahead with any demolition at this point in time. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Richter.
Yeah, Mr. Backen, I recall getting a report from staff this summer where they went through the, because there's some confusion here about what is heritage value. There were stories that came out in the public hearing, but then staff went through and looked at each of those buildings, and I remember them saying there is no heritage value to those buildings because they've been so significantly altered primarily over the years. The heritage value is gone.
Well, I think that's effectively correct. There was a report that found that they were of limited heritage value. There was, if you will, a response from the public that said, well, there's additional information and there was some heritage value. Staff reviewed it, and and based on the information they had, did not change the position, to which there was again more public input that said, oh, wait a minute, there is still more, and it hasn't gone any further than that. So there is certainly a great amount of debate about the heritage value of them. And again, I would just reiterate that as we go through the process, it's going to be important for council and their reasons to indicate what they perceive the heritage value to be for now each of the three divided motions.
Thank you. Councillor Long?
Well, I'm just wondering how you want to proceed, Your Worship. I understand some of the comments that may be dividing it up. I mean, there's no harm in dividing it up. We still have the application in front of us. Now it's been divided into three. But there was a little bit of discussion just now about the properties on Church Street in Mary, the 23272, 9135, 9123, that there was some information submitted to council about some of the potential historic significance of it, and I'd like to find a way to make sure that that gets fully explored, whether we could order an as-found report or something about it in the interim. But it sounds like we need to move along somewhere, Your Worship, and so it's up to you to decide which way we go. But I would like to incorporate that part, no matter what happens, is that we should have clarification on those residential properties. I know that staff gave the information that was available to them. There was a lot of discussion at the Heritage Advisory Committee, and you know, there's some complications here because staff can only go by what they have, and then there's other information that was discovered by members of the public and so forth. So we need to get to the bottom of that, and probably a consultant to look at those properties would be a good answer towards that, and maybe the proponent could pay part of the consulting fees on that.
Certainly. So, Mr. Backen, Glover East and Mary Church, we understand there's an application in front of staff, so we'll deal with that separately than the other, that block of 5. By referring this back, we're not saying yes, we're not saying no, we're referring it back to staff to bring it back to council along with the development permit. So we're not saying no to it. If the motion was to refer this back to staff to bring back, I think that can be dealt with quite easily. There is some question. I read the report again today regarding the staff report on those buildings, and I appreciate the staff's work on that. It gave a lot of insight. I also am thinking of the Holiday House, which if you took away all the additions to that, all you're going to have is studs, because the walls have been taken down and they've been made into rooms for that restaurant at that time. And we're going at great lengths to make sure that that building is restored and kept. And I'm failing to see the difference between that one and some of these for the same reasons. They've been added onto, it's been changed, it's been altered. By the time you remove all the additions, you end up with something that's going to take a bit of work to restore. And I think it's important that we do that. So I'm going to ask that if we have a motion to refer this back to staff to come back to council along with the development permit. We're not saying no, we're saying we want to see more information, and those other buildings that are in there may be something that they're incorporated into the new design, and maybe that just the design, not necessarily the buildings, or maybe they're moved off and put someplace else, or the elements are put into the design so that we have that look and feel of the Heritage Conservation Area. So, Mr. Backen, your advice on that?
So taking it through, Your Worship, I think what you're saying is that council, rather than make a decision on the demolition permit for Glover East and Mary Church, would like to refer that back to staff to consider the demolition permit concurrently with the development permit for those properties, and that staff should circulate the preliminary development proposal just so council has that information.
Yes. So if we could have a motion to that effect. Councillor Whitmarsh moves it. Is there a seconder? Councillor Arneson seconds it. I'm going to open the discussion on that referral.
And we've included an as-found report on those properties then?
That could be Mr. Backen, would that be as a separate motion, or would that be?
That could be a separate motion or a friendly amendment, but we'd have to elaborate as to what the as-found report means to the council member.
That's great. I think so I think we take it as a separate motion, just so we're clear, and then it could be added on, if that's okay with.
You want it now as an amendment, or you want to pass this one?
Let's go through this one and see what the flavor is with council. If this passes, then a separate motion for an as-found report. Okay. This is referring the 5 properties, Mary Church and Glover East, back to staff to come back with the development permit. Mr. Backen, Ms. Bauer could read the referral on that portion of it.
Your Worship, we're just, because of the dialogue, who was the mover and seconder of the referral?
Okay, I missed, that was Councillor Whitmarsh moved it, and Carl Arneson seconded. Yeah.
The amendment would be that the Glover East and Mary Church portion be referred back to staff to come back to council with the information from the development application currently in stream.
That would be come back with the development permit application, or concurrently with it.
So just to elaborate, the development permit be referred back to staff.
Or the demolition permit.
Sorry, the demolition permit, sorry, that's correct. The demolition permit be referred back to staff to be considered further concurrently with the development permit application for those properties when it's appropriate, and that we circulate to council the application or the documents for the application that were recently submitted.
Yes. Okay, thank you. Yep. Councillor Arneson?
Thank you, Worship. Further to that, if it's agreeable to council, I would like to have staff include information from our own Township of Langley Heritage Strategy, which is a document that was supported by council in 2012, and it's got a lot of valuable information, I think, that will help to clarify this idea of what constitutes heritage in a context such as this.
That could just be provided to council as direction. Okay, thank you. Any further discussion on this? Seeing none, I'll call the question. Oh, I'm going to go back. I'm going to just do an adjustment here on my attendance. Mark absent, Councillor Woodward. Okay. Okay, now I've called the question again. Sorry about that. I just had to mark Councillor Woodward absent on that. Carries with Councillor Richter opposed. So we've dealt with Glover East and Mary.
Well, I want to make the amendment.
Oh, sir, you want to make the motion for the as found. So Councillor Long, I'll put you back on again. Where are you? Councillor Long.
Okay, I'd make a motion that an as found report be prepared by a qualified consultant, expert, on those properties on Church and Mary. That be done in good timing and given to council.
And who would fund that? Is that a staff, council, or sorry, Township of Langley funding? Mr. Back, is that where the funding source would come from? As found reports.
The way it is being approached, I think it would have to be, Your Worship, because of course there's no development application to consider. It's just for information at this point.
Okay, thank you.
Well, if a proponent would like to contribute towards it, that'd be very nice, but it may not happen.
We're going to ask for contributions. So it hasn't been seconded yet. If as soon as you have the motion, if you could just read it, and then we'll ask for a seconder.
The motion is that the Glover East Mary Church portion, staff work with a consultant to provide a as-found report.
So just to restate it, Your Worship, I think that's probably accurate. I heard the amendment to be that staff be requested to provide an as-found report by a qualified consultant as to the properties on Mary and Church Street.
Yeah, not the Glover East. We know about those.
Okay, thank you. So just hold on. I just want to get a seconder for that. Is there a seconder? Councillor Arneson seconds. Okay, Councillor Davis, you want to push your... Councillor Davis?
What does as found mean? And is this another opinion? Like everyone's got an opinion.
Yeah. It might, Mr. Backer, if you can describe what an as found report is by a qualified consultant.
Just because you paid for it makes it real? Maybe the guy...
No, it's a fair question.
Yeah,
maybe we can just get an answer from staff, and then you have the opportunity to vote on it, yes or no.
The as-found report is effectively an inventory of what heritage elements are actually present. That's one way of describing it. However, because we have somewhat embarked upon that process already through the staff review, my question was, how is this going to be different? But Councillor Long clarified it by indicating that it would not be undertaken by staff, but by a qualified consultant.
And my way of looking at it is there's a lot of community interest in this, and as several members of council and myself certainly are not experts in heritage, and we do appreciate the staff, but I think to have an independent qualified professional do that, and it's, I think, really in the community interest for us to get those answers.
But I don't see what who's qualified for heritage? Like, how can you, we've learned that you have one building, if it's not heritage, it's not heritage, but you have a community around it and it's got more value. I mean, one of those buildings was a doctor's office 50 years ago or 55 years ago, and I broke an arm. I went in there. That's heritage to me. I might have fallen in love in the restaurant, the lamplighter with Nicole. Like, that's heritage. Like, what, this is just an opinion. Like, he's going to go by the color of the paint and by the size. You know, like, how does... Jack's got a funny look on his face. I don't know what to. I don't know what to. Like, what? How much is that going to cost? And is that going to complicate this process even more?
Your Worship, I'm not sure it would complicate it. The question is the extra value or clarity that will be provided. I think Councillor Long's position is it's going to be helpful to have an independent expert do it because of the, I guess, concern raised in the area. I think the other element of it is that the heritage elements are not truly subjective. It's really a matter of an inventory, and it may be architectural features, it may be individual features, it may be the door, it may be the doorway, it may be the windows, it may be the windowsills, it may be the wood.
Okay, I understand.
And I think the critical answer to your question is that if you were in the building, you'd probably be labeled as being heritage, given your age.
Okay, thanks.
Councillor Whitmarsh.
Yeah, so I think it's helpful to have more information. It's always helpful to have information. I like the idea of protecting heritage. I like the idea of restoring some of those buildings. But back to the point that I made earlier, we can get this information, and in the end, if the proponent doesn't want to do it, there's nothing we can do. So, you know, I think having information is always great, but it's going to be information that we're going to have, and the proponent can then just decide whatever they want to do with it anyways. We can't hold them to do it anything. We can't ask the proponent to do those. Well, I guess we can ask. They don't have to go along with it. So it just seems kind of, I don't know how much it costs to do this, but I mean, I guess it's valuable information. Maybe there's pieces that could be incorporated into it, and we'll discover that through the information. But it does seem to be, in the end, it's up to the proponent to decide if they want to accept it or not, and they'll do whatever they want in the end anyways. And all we can do is ensure that whatever's there, whether they restore it or whether they build something new, that it has heritage value and fits in with the community. That's all we can do. We can't require them to keep that same building there, no matter how many reports we get done.
On this development permit, we could, with further information, require elements be put into the design if we felt it was necessary, and that this report might help us with that. That there is a purpose for it. So we've done this before, and development permits have come forward in the heritage conservation area where the design we felt didn't fit, and it was sent back and came back with revamped designs, and that's happened before. I know it happened with the medical building that was built, and elements we didn't agree with. And then the designer took it back, came back, and I think brought something better. So having that information may help us and say, no, we want to retain that look and feel of Fort Langley, and having that information, having those buildings there, saying, okay, this is what's going to replace it. Even if we do decide, yes, they all get demolished or whatever, those elements are there, and we have that information. But there may be elements there. We may learn more information, and I agree. I think more information is better. But that's just, hopefully that helps. Councillor Ferguson.
I think we could kind of do that if they're building a garage. I think we've already got a referral for those 5 properties. We've also there's some interest expressed about an application. We can get to the bottom of that. I think there's one more piece. I don't think we need it. I understand what the logic of what's being addressed and said about what we can do at development permit or during the development process. We can request things, advise things. As being said, we can't force the owner to do things other than comply with our bylaws, comply with our policies, and therefore I just don't see a need for this right now. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so this is on the as found report motion. I'm going to call the question. Do I label that K1 also? Okay, thank you. And it carries with Councillor Ferguson and Councillor Richter opposed. So I think that puts Glover East and Mary Church to bed, and we move on to Glover West. There's 3 properties there, and there is a motion on the floor. I would like to ask, and I know it's in the report, but just to help clarify, There's 3 properties there. There's several, I guess, businesses operating there, and some of them are vacant. Can staff just quickly let council know how many are being occupied, if any of them are being occupied, or are they all vacant?
Your Worship, potentially the best way to describe it, I was trying to see if this graphic would assist, but maybe it doesn't. Staff's understanding is that the northerly portion of what's referred to as Gasoline Alley are currently occupied and tenanted. The rest of them are not.
And there are some businesses fronting Glover Road that are still operating. That are still operating that, isn't there? Okay, so it's just those in Gasoline Alley. Okay, thanks. That helps. Okay, so on this one too, again, the same argument. Although there is no application downstairs, there has been an application that was submitted to the Township of Langley in the past and had been withdrawn by the proponent. Again, I prefer to see what's going to take its place. Those buildings, some of them are being occupied, some of them are boarded up. I don't see the value in taking them down at this point and leaving a big jagged hole, and it's like a missing tooth. We had that in the past down that strip, and the IJ burned down, and there was the old hardware store that took a long time. And I think for me, I'd like to see that. I think there's a heritage conservation area, and this area should be maintained until something comes in its place. And those buildings are being occupied now. Whether the others could be occupied in the future, I'm not sure, but they still, I think, are valuable to the heritage area. Councillor Arneson?
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. I agree for the same reasons as our last discussion. Through Your Worship, to Mr. Bakken, I had a question regarding the property standards that we have for that area for building maintenance, and so the degree to which there is some responsibility for an owner to maintain them to a certain degree.
That's correct. There's some limited requirements that they must maintain them to the extent that they not be a hazard, not be unsightly, and be safe. That can be achieved sometimes by boarding them up. It can be achieved sometimes by securing them. It can be achieved by maintaining them or operating them. In this circumstance, I think each building has to be assessed on a case-by-case basis, because I believe some are boarded up, and I believe staff's review of them thought they were done in a safe manner.
And just to clarify, because there have been reports of vandalism and potentially rodents and things like that. So my question is really whether or not that would be something that should trigger action from the responsible landowner as opposed to a reason for the demolition of the buildings, because ultimately that's where the responsibility lies.
I think your question is, can they be required to maintain them at that very base level as opposed to being permitted to demolish them? And that's in council's jurisdiction. So we'd have to assess each situation in terms of your examples, infestation, rodents, whatever may be occurring, to make sure there may be traps or maybe secure items inside that can't harm the public. We have to go through that process and look at them on a case-by-case basis.
Thank you.
Any further discussion from council on this? Councillor Richter.
I want to clarify. So with the Glover West, we're voting to, what's the motion? Are we voting to take them down or not take them down?
Yeah, the motion as it stands right now is to approve the demolition permit under the heritage alteration permit. That's what's on the floor, unless there was alternative direction. Councillor Whitmarsh.
Yeah, I think we should treat these ones the same as we're treating Glover East and Mary Church, and that we do not approve a demolition permit until we have an approved development application.
In relation to that, this is a heritage conservation area, and that the area being heritage, having those buildings missing, it takes away. We don't know what's going to come in its place, and I think there's a heritage aspect to this area.
Yes.
Not each individual building, again, has its own merits, or it is or it isn't. And the staff report said that they don't have heritage value. However, there's a conservation area, and I've been reading on that, and that the area to be maintained by taking these down would jeopardize that look and feel. I don't know, Mr. Bakken is kind of looking.
So I think what you're suggesting is that the demolition permit, or heritage alteration permit, be deferred until there's a development permit application the council can review.
Well, correct, but would it not be reviewed and approved?
Council could then at that point, you could stipulate now it must be approved, or you could simply wait to entertain it, and then you could actually deal with it at a later point. That's your option.
Fair enough.
Councillor Long?
Yeah, I agree with that, and I think the other rationale is that being part of a heritage conservation area, that this impacts the whole streetscape and the whole heritage feel of that block. So that's the other reason I would support what's being suggested.
Okay, so we do need a motion then.
No, you've got the motion.
No, there's a motion.
Down.
No, there's no, the referral motion to staff is not on the table for this.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, so we need a referral motion. Mr. Backen had the wording there. Did you make that motion, Councillor Whitmarsh? Did you move it?
I was making a motion.
Okay. There was no second. No, well, we haven't got there. I'm going through the speaking list. Okay, thank you. Is there a seconder?
Sorry.
Councillor Long seconds.
Okay.
So discussion. So this is on the Glover West. Like, if you could read the motion, I think just to sort of council's clear. Let's make sure we're clear on the motion.
The motion would be that the demolition permit be deferred until the development permit is brought before council.
Okay.
For those three
For
addresses.
Glover West.
Glover West.
So it's been moved and seconded. See no discussion. Call the question. Carries with Councillor Richter opposed. Okay, so that completes K1. And if we're going to ask Councillor Woodward to come back.
Oh, sorry, I apologize. I do have another matter, but it's
Another matter.
related to this, but
Oh, sorry.
yeah, sorry.
If we-
Don't bring him back.
Can you just let them know that Councillor Arneson had, I'm sorry, I didn't realize. Councillor Arneson.
Thank you, Your Worship. I apologize. Well, our way of dissecting this group of buildings is going to be slightly challenged by this motion. However, I'll just put it forward. So the motion is to request that staff undertake the necessary steps to formally assess the potential for the relocation of the residential properties included in this demolition application being 9123 Church Street, 23272 Mary Avenue, and 9712 Glover Road. Based on the condition of the homes and the findings of a detailed feasibility plan, staff will report back to council regarding options to temporarily relocate these buildings as has been similarly negotiated in other development proposals in the township in order to save them from demolition. The staff report should further include longer-term options to permanently relocate them to the benefit of the village of Fort Langley by enhancing local heritage values and enriching the local streetscape. That's my motion.
Okay. Did you provide that in writing to the?
Oh, she's got it.
She's got it. Okay, great. You've got
Yeah.
it. Okay.
Can I speak to that just?
Sure. I'll just get a seconder.
Yeah.
Is there a seconder? That's to relocate.
The residential
which-
homes.
Maybe get the map back up and we can to see which homes those are. If we just
That could wait till then, but they need to be assessed. Oops.
it got newer.
Our past is flashing before our eyes. Fort Langley's future.
There we go.
Okay.
Okay. So which addresses?
So, sorry, if we can get that map.
Yeah, there we go.
again. Yeah.
So which addresses were you referring
9123 Church Street.
to? Okay. Yeah. Got it. The bottom. Yeah, it is. Yeah. 9123. Yeah.
These are
Yeah.
all residences.
Yeah. 9123.
Yeah. 23272
Yeah.
Mary Avenue.
Yeah.
And 9712 Glover Road.
Nice.
Did I get the number wrong? I don't think so.
Oh, you mean 9217?
Oh, sorry, they're transposed.
Okay.
Yes, that would be right.
9217.
Yeah,
So
thank you.
those residences. Okay, that helps. So the motion is to get a report back from staff on that, or to
Yes.
go ahead, I don't know.
Report on the feasibility, basically.
Okay, is there a seconder to that? It's a motion. Councillor Whitmer seconds it. So did you wish to speak to it?
Yes, please.
Okay,
Yeah.
go ahead.
I've included this because I think one of the biggest considerations is when we're looking at this area. So if demolition permits are being requested, I think the prudent thing to do is to look at the opportunity and make a rational assessment as to whether or not any of these buildings could actually be saved. So this is not something to me that is an unreasonable prospect. I would just point to the fact the Township of Langley has done this on a number of occasions with other heritage buildings. Well, I use that term advisedly because apparently these aren't heritage, but nonetheless, I would point out that most of these buildings are at least as old as the Beatniks Bistro, which was very successfully redeveloped and turned into a beautiful asset for the downtown core. So I think that the way this is formatted is a reasonable opportunity to take a second look at those different residential properties. It would do a lot of things. Environmentally, it's much better than destroying a building. This is the last thing we really want to do, is to just go in there and take something apart. Nobody can make any use of it, and it'll just go to a landfill. So the idea is there are companies that actually do those kind of assessments, and they're very expert at considering where the building could be relocated to. And the purpose of a staff report is just to look at an opportunity where temporarily, while the rest of these conversations are taking place, I don't anticipate that it's likely that those buildings will be able to remain on those particular sites. But I do think it's important that they have their context and that they should remain in Fort Langley. This would give us an opportunity to have a longer-term view of what options might be available. Could be somebody locally in the community that has a place on their property, could be on the township's lands. There's many different ways, I think, in which it could be done, but obviously it's only going to be done if it's reasonable and feasible.
Thank you. Councillor Davis?
Is this would kind of then run concurrent with the heritage, so we're getting two opinions then. Well, maybe not. One is focused on moving them temporarily. Okay, I just wanted to clarify that.
Thank you. Councillor Long?
Davis will move it for a case of whiskey.
So they did the hotel, or what is it?
So, Your Worship, we've already ordered an as-found report on those properties, and I think that would be part of maybe what the consultant can advise us about, whether there's any merit in moving. But it sounds to me like what was missing is adding the 9217 Glover perhaps to that as-found report as well, because that is a residence that wasn't included in the motion. But I would rather see the report from the consultant and then talk about moving. So maybe we could entertain dealing with that, having the consultant talk about the potential moving if there is heritage value, but also adding 9217 to the.
So, Mr. Backen, as far
Good
as
idea, Your Worship, but the consultants are usually significantly different. One is a construction consultant to look at the viability of a relocation and structural integrity. The other is to look at the heritage in terms of the composition, the elements of the structure itself in a much different light. So while there's some merit doing it concurrently, I think it would be different consultants.
I don't think we would do it concurrently. I think we should get one done, and based upon the information from that, we could go embark on the other initiative of potentially moving.
So if this passes, that could be direction to staff.
I think that would have to be added, Your Worship, to assess the relocation opportunities. I'm being general here, following the as-found report.
Would you be okay to add that, following the
as-found report first?
Oh, okay, so the other one would be subsequent to that.
Yeah.
Okay.
So we just add that as an amendment, as long as there's unanimous consent on that amendment.
Or the motion would be subsequent to the as-found.
That'd be fine, because then based on that.
Here, let me get your mic on. Let me get your mic on.
Thank you. Wow. I don't know. I can see the reasoning behind that, because first of all, you'd want to know whether or not you thought it was a satisfactory building, and then secondarily, you'd want an expert to come like Nickel Brothers and look at it and see whether or not it was going to be able to be relocated, because that's a physical infrastructure decision. Thank you.
But, Your Worship, I think we should add 9217 to the consultant's work then.
Okay, so
Chocolate factory.
I don't know if we can amend this motion to add that. We'll need a separate motion to add that, okay? So we'll deal with this one, okay? So, yeah, that's on the moving report, not on the as found. Okay, as long as that's okay. There's no objection to adding that amendment that this be after the as found. Okay, I don't see any objection. Councillor Ferguson? Speak to it.
Yeah, I'm trying to get my head around what's happening right now. We just voted on a $90-some-odd million project. Now we're going to give up on the museum lands in Fort Langley and put these houses there?
That's not been mentioned.
Well, I just wondering, okay, Mr. Mayor, tell me where these properties are going to go in Fort Langley. No, he said well, yeah, that's right. There's a 11-story apartment building that's going to replace by one of these houses.
I think the report will just come back to see if they can be moved, and we determine
I think we
later.
rely sometimes a little bit too much on our staff, and we make motions up here. We've seen it over the years, and I don't know. I don't even remember seeing this motion in our package. I'm sure it might have been there, but if I may, through the clerk, was this in our package?
No, this is a motion on the floor.
How is this? Wasn't this not a notice of motion then?
It's a motion on the floor dealing with these buildings, which was in our package, so a member of council can make that motion. It's on the floor. It's been moved and seconded. You can move to defer it if you wish, but right now it's on the floor. So you wish to speak to the motion?
Well, yeah, I will. I'll defer this for a ruling I guess I'll just defer this to a council priorities committee meeting.
Is there a seconder
so
to that?
We can discuss it. Rather than voting on it tonight and using staff money.
I don't see a seconder. Okay. Councillor Arneson is next.
Well, I'm not sure it will be helpful at this point. I stopped short of making any suggestions about where exactly it could go, but I would point out that there is some fluidity in the plans that we currently have in and around the area. And I don't even know that it wouldn't end up on private property. All I'm suggesting is that there are opportunities to relocate homes of a fairly small footprint that would add to the character of the entire community. And if I was given a choice between that and destroying them and leaving a pile of rubble, I would choose the former.
Just to explore the suitability of them being moved. It doesn't have a location. Okay. Okay, Councillor Ferguson.
Well, okay, that's good. Okay, I'm glad that we heard that. What if, and I know folks that work for Nickel Brothers, and they've got all sorts of examples of going into places and finding the houses or properties aren't worth moving. I think we already earlier on we decided on, in council's wisdom or lack thereof, to actually do an evaluation, and I think that would be step one and see what happens rather than doing both tonight. But maybe for a cup of coffee, I'll bet council that probably there isn't much structural integrity. But let's let number one work first. We've already voted on that. I don't think we're ready for number two. That's just my personal opinion.
Thank you, Councillor Long.
For clarification, Your Worship, did we not say that we'll go ahead first of all with the evaluation by an independent expert and then talk about this afterwards?
It is in the motion. It is in the motion. It's been added. That's been added to this motion that I guess it's a phone call to Nickel Brothers or a similar sort of company. Can these things be moved? Is to be done after the evaluation. Yeah, that was added as an amendment. Mr. Backen.
You're asking for that to be reread, Your Worship?
Yeah. So
it's that an assessment be done as to relocation opportunities of the residential homes consisting of the three properties 912323 272 and 9217 after the as found report is completed.
Okay. I don't see any other discussion. I'm going to call the question on that. Carries. Councillor Richter, Councillor Ferguson opposed. Okay, are we done? Okay, Councillor Long.
So let's just, to clean this up, let's add 9217 to the as found report.
Okay, it's been moved. Is there a seconder? A seconder to add? Councillor Arneson? Any discussion on adding 9217 to the as found report? Seeing none, I'm calling the question on K1. Carries with Councillor Richter, Councillor Ferguson opposed. Are we now complete with K1? All right, if we could ask Councillor Woodward to please return. The best part's coming and they're leaving.
Drum roll. Oh, bar the doors.
Councillor Woodward's been notified to come back? Staff, yeah. Okay, so we'll move on to the rest of our agenda. And the next item is the Mayor's Report. I'd like to say good evening to everyone and welcome back after we had 7 weeks off. I hope everyone enjoyed the last of the summer, and it was a pretty good summer with some really nice weather. There are several events that Council attended over the break, starting on Thursday, July 25th, with the annual UDI 7th Annual Fraser Valley Summer Social for South of the Fraser. I was pleased to attend and connect with local and regional businesses. On July 25th was also the grand opening of the new Atlas Steak and Fish House at the Coast Hotel and in the neighboring city of Langley. It was a great new restaurant, and I know Gateway Casinos are the one that operate that. On Saturday, July 27th, I was pleased to participate in the opening of the Jazz and Arts Festival in Fort Langley. This was the second annual event, and it was a huge success, with outdoor stages, concert presentations, and workshops being held throughout the weekend. Great addition to Fort Langley. On Thursday, August the 1st, Joy TV filmed a segment with the Canadian Barbecue Boys, who are raising awareness of the importance of keeping your grill clean to avoid grease fires. We had them demonstrate by cleaning my barbecue, which definitely needed it. And members of the Township of Langley Fire Department were on hand to discuss safe barbecue practices. And it's actually up on YouTube, and where these young fellows went to Dragon's Den and got some funding, and they were going across Canada in their motorhome, getting support and business for their new venture. On Wednesday, August the 14th, I attended the Chartwell Langley Gardens Retirement Residence, where we thanked all the seniors who participated in the Township's age-friendly Business Recognition Program. We received 28 nominations for various types of businesses in Walnut Grove from them, and it was good to be there and support those businesses which are age-friendly. The prestigious Minto Cup Junior A National Lacrosse Championship returned to the Langley Event Centre, and I participated in a press conference on August 15th, and the opening ceremony is on August the 16th. On August 16th, I also attended the official opening and ribbon cutting for Central Agencies Insurance. The weekend of August 16, 17, and 18 was the second annual Rib Fest hosted by the Rotary Clubs of Langley at McLeod Athletic Park. This was another great event, and $100,000 was raised for charity. It was really well attended, and I was fortunate enough to participate in the rib judging on Sunday, which is a must-do. I also like to point out that the international president of Rotary was in the area for another event, and he took the time, and he also helped judge the ribs, and he was out. So it was quite an honor for the Rotary Clubs to have the international president out. On Thursday, August 22nd, was the annual A&W Burgers to Beat MS Day, and I enjoyed a teen burger for a good cause. On September 3rd and 4th, two other Metro Vancouver staff and myself toured two waste landfill facilities in Oregon and Washington State. And about 5% of the trash that we generate in Metro Vancouver ends up in landfills in Oregon and Washington. And what was really interesting is what they do with it. Like, these landfills are state-of-the-art, very, very sustainable, meeting all the environment requirements. And in fact, in the next week, on September 18th, I don't think anybody's going to be going down there, but if you want to, the Governor of Washington State, Jay Inslee, and Senator Curtis King are honored guests of a dedication of the it's a Click-Tat Public Utility Department's renewable natural gas project, where they take the gas that's generated, the methane gas, clean it and put it back into the system as natural gas. And across the river in Oregon is the waste management landfill, where they take the gas and they burn it and create electricity, which goes back in the grid. So unfortunately, not all of our trash is diverted. Metro Vancouver, we divert 63% of it, but that trash that is gone to landfills, they're recovering energy and putting it back in the grid in a very sustainable manner. And beautiful country, very dry country out there, and that's one of the reasons it's good for the landfill. It's very dry, I think only 6 inches of rain a year. We got that last night, I think. On Thursday, September the 5th, was the Government of Canada funding announcement hosted by our Member of Parliament, John Aldag, and held at the Langley Centennial Museum with the Kwantlen First Nation, who received the very exciting news that $3 million in funding has been provided for the creation of a new Fort Langley Museum Heritage Centre, which will feature an Indigenous museum and community museum. On Saturday, September 7th, was the annual Langley Good Times Cruise-In, which was held for its 3rd year in Aldergrove. What a great event and a huge turnout. As mayor, I had the opportunity to select the mayor's choice vehicle, and I chose the 1993 Jurassic Park Jeep. And it had a lot of fan appeal. I thought, there's so many kids getting their picture taken with it. I had to pick that as my choice, but there was an amazing amount of vehicles. In fact, the organizers had to cut off the registrations because it filled up. There were so many vehicles. It was such a success this year. Council was also very busy during summer, as I know I took some vacation time, and Acting Mayor Richter was certainly busy. On August 10, she attended the Langley Day of Possibilities and a farewell for MLI Japanese exchange students. Councillor Richter attended the Langley Eats Local at the Farmers Market opening on August 14th and was a judge at the Leps Blackberry Bake Off on August 22nd. She also attended the Ace Hardware grand opening in Walnut Grove on August 23rd and the Langley Surrey Parkinson Society of BC annual Super Walk on September 7th, along with Councillor Davis. Councillor Arneson attended the roundtable meeting with Minister Bill Blair, in my absence, thank you, regarding the cannabis industry on August the 8th, and the Greater Langley Chamber of Commerce August dinner meeting. She also attended the Port Metro Annual Port Metro Annual Board Mayor's meeting on September the 5th. Was there a harbour cruise involved? A tour? Did you get a tour of the harbour?
I'll make you jealous if I tell you about the tour. It was lovely, yeah.
Tour of the harbour. It's interesting to see what Port Metro Vancouver does. It's
very educational.
Yeah, that's good.
Okay.
I know I did that a couple of years ago. It's a good tour. Where were we here? So that was September 5th. The AAA Seniors Housing Forum, you also attended, and the Langley Lodge Caring Hearts Annual Garden Party on Saturday, September 7th, and the Jazz Festival in Fort Langley. Councillor Ferguson attended the federal funding announcement in Fort Langley Museum Heritage Centre, and Councillor Long also attended the federal funding announcement. Upcoming events is happening right now. It's Railvolution Transit and Community Development Conference is happening in Vancouver. It's the first time in, I think, 25 years that conference has come to Canada, and I've had the opportunity to attend it in the United States, and it talks about transportation and transit and city building, and it's a very worthwhile conference, and I'll be attending parts of it this week, and hopefully Council can also make some time to get down there. And on Saturday is the second annual Mayor's Charitable Gala, which is working with the Township of Langley Firefighters Charitable Society and raising money for the new hospice that's coming to Langley. So that's a sold-out event, and very thankful for the support the community gives to our charities. So with that, I'll ask if Council has anything else to add. Seeing nothing, we'll move on to, I'm going to go back to my agenda, other business. Councillor Richter.
Yes, I'd like to refer delegations D2 and D4 to staff for a report.
Okay. Second by Councillor Ferguson. No discussion, show of hands. All those in favour? Opposed? That carries. Any other business?
Yes, and I also have, there's a number of items that came through and items distributed that I wanted to flag and see if staff could give us an update on them. Item 17 with regards to traffic enforcement on Traddle Street. Item 19, this is from the September 5th list. Wanting request from Mrs. Nash in Walnut Grove with regards to the Topham Elementary School and L'École des Voyageurs to make sure that a 30K traffic zone is put in there. A letter from James Jordan, item 20, which he had raised an issue with regards to curb painting, and it still hasn't been done. Item 21, I'm just wondering, this was the memorial for young Carson up in Walnut Grove. This letter says that we painted it over, and I'm just wondering through you to Mr. Backen, is it our practice to paint them over quickly, or can we not let them be there for a bit longer?
Back on Mr. Zweig.
Thank you, Your Worship. With consultation with the family, it was appropriate to cover up the accumulation of candles, wax, and some of the artifacts that were left behind. But it's key to remind that was in support with the family.
Okay. Also, item number 22 with regards to putting a youth care worker up at Walnut Grove facility. I would like to refer that one to staff. And then there's the whole issue of parking in the mall in Aldergrove. Bob Long, you were going to put forward a motion on that, weren't you?
Well, I did mention it, and the staff responded already, but...
Okay, so it's already been...
So it's already been dealt with?
Could we add it as one of the highlights? You're listing a whole bunch of things.
Just for staff to be aware.
Yeah. And then in today's items distributed, items number 18 and 19, there's an issue with the intersection at 240th Street and 54th, as well as some concerns over the traffic pattern at the new RE Mountain Middle School and Secondary School. So I would like, we knew that it was going to be problematic, but I'm hoping that they got everything worked out.
Early pains on a brand new school and new school year. I'm sure they'll work on that, but it's good that they brought it to our attention. Yeah. Councillor Long, did you have something to add? No, okay. Okay, any further business? Motion to terminate?
Sorry, I pressed the button.
Oh, Councillor Davis?
I know it's late, but do we have a report? I've been watching this, the Highway 1 216th overpass, and it's been saying it's going to be opened on the fall of 2019, and now I see they've changed it to the winter of 2020, and I just wondered if that's any update.
Mr. Backen?
I think effectively it's to allow further settlement. What they're finding is the soil conditions are a bit challenging, so while much of the construction is done, they need additional time to settle, and their best estimate is to give it effectively another 3/4 to 1 year.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you. So motion to terminate?
Termination.
Councillor Davis moves termination. Seconder? Councillor Arneson. All those in favour? Opposed? Carried. Thank you. We'll now take a short break and commence the public hearing in a few minutes.